couple weeks ago, I was working on the European Parliament video, but while I was working, something pretty interesting happened in the European Union that got my attention. But I unfortunately couldn't talk about it in that video because it wasn't relevant to the topic. On the 3rd of February, the EU and Ukraine held a summit in Kyiv to talk about, among other things, Ukraine's EU accession. A day before that, the Commission's president, as well as 15 of the 27 commissioners, were already in Kyiv. They were there to look at how much progress Ukraine has made on the areas where it needs to rework itself to become an EU member, and the result was pretty positive, so there will likely be another checkup in spring, presumably April. Stuff like this is notable because it's not only the first summit that has been held with Ukraine since the start of the war, but also the first time that a large amount of commissioners visited Kyiv together. Ukraine received the candidate status for EU membership in June of last year, which was hastily accepted when they applied for it in February, a couple days after the invasion started. And being the skeptical Western European that I am, I thought, great! But this is likely only a moral and political move to stick it to Russia, because Ukraine still needs to do a lot of things before they can actually become a member. But because of these two events, I might actually change my mind on it a little. The Commission seems to be taking Ukraine's membership a lot more seriously than I thought. So that begs the question, will Ukraine join the EU soon? Of course, the answer isn't just a clear yes or no, because Ukraine isn't the only one that's currently vying for EU membership. Some others have applied, some are also candidates, and some are actively negotiating and are close to becoming a member, much closer than Ukraine is. So, on a scale from S to F, how close are all of them to becoming a member? Let's find out. Montenegro is actually pretty easy to talk about since they're already so far ahead of everyone else, so instead I'll use them to explain how the EU accession process actually works. You can generally split the process up into 4 phases: applicant, candidate, negotiating candidate, and member. In the first phase, the country needs to formally apply to join to the European Council, which consists of the heads of state of each member state. Then they go to the European Commission and are like, yo, should we let this guy in? And then the Commission is like, yeah, hold on, let me do a background check. And if the Commission approves, then that country becomes an official candidate. Montenegro applied in 2008 and was given candidate status in 2010. Second phase. Now that they're a candidate, before they can start negotiating, the country needs to bring their legislation closer to that of the EU's, which is known as the Copenhagen criteria, or parts of it at least. Basically, the country needs to be democratic, have a good competitive market economy, and they also need to be European. Which could be a little difficult to achieve because land masses cannot instantly move to a different location kilometers away. In this phase, any country in the EU can still use their veto to hold up any negotiations in case they need to clear something else up first, which wasn't such a huge problem for Montenegro, but we'll see it in news later. Montenegro met the criteria and was able to start the third phase in 2012. Here, the country needs to adopt the laws of the EU, which is known as the acquis communautaire, or just the EU acquis, which is the last part of the Copenhagen criteria. Montenegro has already completed 3 out of the 33 sections of the acquis and are currently working on all of the other ones, which they might finish by 2025. And when they do, they'll enter the final phase, getting the approval of each member state. And boom, that's how you become an EU member. Later on in the EU life cycle, each member needs to join the Schengen area, which is the initiative for open borders, as well as the Eurozone, so that each member uses the same currency. But that's unless you have an opt-out, like Denmark for the Eurozone or Ireland for Schengen, or you can permanently stall because there isn't actually a deadline. Since their independence, Montenegro hasn't had their own currency and has just used the euro since 2002. Of course, this isn't really allowed, but it would be stupid if they were forced to stop using the euro, only to then adopt it again later. But then again, we are talking about the EU here, where complications are the norm. So who knows? Anyways, S tier. Just like Montenegro, Albania and North Macedonia are in the negotiating phase and have been trying to become a member for a while, with North Macedonia applying in 2004 and Albania applying in 2009. But unfortunately, they haven't made as much progress as Montenegro, which is not their fault, but ours. Like I said, every single country is able to veto and block negotiations in the second phase, with Greece famously using their veto to force North Macedonia into changing their name. Then Bulgaria saw that happening and was like, oh hey, I can force concessions as well. Macedonian is now a fake language and you have to protect the minority Bulgarians. Thank you very much. Oh mon dieu, get along already! Both of these vetoes have put talks with North Macedonia at a complete standstill between when they became a candidate in 2005 and when the conflicts were finally resolved in 2022. And while Albania has been a candidate since 2014, they couldn't progress either because their candidacy was linked to North Macedonia, just like how the Eastern Bloc in 2004 and Romania and Bulgaria in 2007 were also linked. Stuff like this has also sparked concern within the EU because every country being able to veto, no matter their population, might be a little bit too extreme, especially when there are wildcards like Hungary that can shoot down any sort of progress because they felt like it that day. The union is only as strong as its weakest link. Expect a constitutional change soon. In fact, this process took so long that Albania, North Macedonia and also Serbia created their own little EU known as Open Balkan, which aims to open the borders and also to increase trade between the three. Both Montenegro and Bosnia-Herzegovina have also expressed interest in joining this little union. This is both good for the EU accession, because they're already cooperating, but it's also a kind of middle finger to the EU, because they had to wait for so long that they just did it themselves. Thankfully though, things are smooth sailing again, especially after the EU Western Balkan Summit in Tirana in December last year, calling for a faster integration of the Western Balkans into the European Union. But of course, since they just started negotiating, they haven't been able to get started on any sections in the EU acquis, so we're gonna have to give them a couple years to catch up to Montenegro. North Macedonia 8 tier, Albania also 8 tier. Oh, Serbia, you truly are the Balkans of the Balkans. Getting Serbia and Kosovo to get along is like a rock. Because it's hard. Serbia is actually a lot closer to becoming a member than you might expect. They've already completed 2 sections of the EU acquis and are working on 22. Meanwhile, Kosovo submitted an application in December last year, a week after the Tirana summit. Since Kosovo is not a member of the United Nations due to them not being internationally recognized enough, it does make sense why they haven't been given the candidate status either. What makes this even harder is that 5 EU members, Spain, Greece, Slovakia, Romania and Cyprus, are among those countries that have not recognized Kosovo yet. This is because they fear a domino effect. If Kosovo can break away from Serbia, then presumably the same applies to Catalonia, Basque, Northern Cyprus, or the Hungarian minorities. Convincing these 5 to recognize Kosovo will be the most difficult part of getting Kosovo into the EU. Convincing Serbia will also be a difficult task by itself, but they've already made a lot of progress on cooperating with Kosovo. In 2013, they both signed the Brussels Agreement, where they tried to normalize the relations between them by, among other things, promising to not block the other's EU integration process. And in 2020, they signed some economic normalization agreements, where Kosovo agreed to join Open Balkan. Now, of course, all of this hasn't come without backlash. Kosovo is still skeptical about the Open Balkan and hasn't actually made any progress on it. And there have consistently been diplomatic incidents between the two even since the Brussels Agreement. And that also ignores what the EU itself thinks about Serbia. Another agreement of the economic normalization was that Serbia and Kosovo would move their embassies in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This didn't cause as much of an international outrage like when the US did it, but the EU definitely took note of it and glared them down. Serbia has also refused to join the EU in its sanctions against Russia for their war of aggression against Ukraine, since Serbia likes playing both sides. They even butt heads with the Netherlands over their EU accession due to Serbia refusing to recognize the Srebrenica genocide, which the Dutch were unable to stop when they were in charge of protecting that area in 1995. And the final nail in the coffin, Serbian EU membership is genuinely unpopular among Serbians, especially if they have to recognize Kosovo for it. This is why, even when Serbia is able to become a member, people would first like to link them together with Kosovo, similarly to how Albania and North Macedonia are linked, because otherwise Serbia could consistently veto Kosovo away. So, Serbia B tier, Kosovo D tier. It's gonna be a rocky road, but I think we'll get there eventually. Never mind. Moldova, Ukraine and Georgia all submitted their application within just 3 days of each other last year, and I think you know why. All 3 of them have already been working with the EU through the Eastern Partnership Initiative, together with Armenia, Azerbaijan and Belarus. But these 3 applicants have a much deeper relationship due to them helping each other with their EU integration, which is why they're sometimes referred to as the Association Trio. They've also been given access to the European single market through the deep and comprehensive free trade area. As you can see, the relationship with the EU is already there. The main problems here are just internal. Since Moldova and Ukraine have been given their candidate status very early, they're not able to start negotiating yet, instead having a list of demands to complete first, and their candidate status will get taken away if they don't do anything about them. Georgia was also given a bunch of demands, but hasn't even gotten their candidate status yet. One thing that holds all 3 of them back is their Russian-backed separatist areas, Transnistria for Moldova, Abkhazia and South Ossetia for Georgia, and Donetsk and Luhansk for Ukraine, on top of Russia's occupation of their southern territories. Georgia especially is going to have to struggle a lot to become a member due to their previous political crises, election fraud, and of course the trouble right under your nose, the Black Sea. Georgia doesn't share a land or maritime border with any other EU member, so European goods will be passing through either the Russian or the Turkish exclusive economic zone in the Black Sea to reach Georgia. As for Ukraine, being at war of course comes with a lot of disadvantages. We have absolutely no idea what Ukraine will look like in the future. But like I said, their progress on their reforms has been pretty good, and many members are trying to make Ukraine's accession go a lot quicker, throwing almost the entire process out the window. The main frontrunners here are Poland and Lithuania, because of their, let's just say, historical distaste for Russia, and also because their regional alliance, known as the Lublin Triangle, could even rival Germany's amount of seats in the European Parliament if Ukraine were to join. They've decided that getting Ukraine to become a member will be one of the main points on their agenda when they take over the presidency of the Council of the European Union in the first half of 2025 and 2027 respectively, which is currently held by Sweden. So, Ukrainian membership in 2025? Unlikely, sure, but impossible? The hell no. Moldova B tier, Georgia C tier, Ukraine C tier. Ah yes, Extra is lumping the oldest candidate and the newest candidate together. Either he's stupid, or something went really, really wrong. Both are correct. So Bosnia is in the same boat as Ukraine and Moldova. They got their candidate status thanks to the Tirana summit just last year, on the same day that Kosovo applied as a matter of fact, but they also have a list of stuff to do before they can actually get to work on the EU acquis. Bosnia's main issue comes from their instability due to them being split between two regions that generally don't like each other, the Bosnian and Croat Bosnia-Herzegovina and the Serb Republika Srpska, although it's not that bad. Srpska is on average a lot more pro-EU than Serbia is, so the only main issue is that the country doesn't have a completely federal institution to communicate with the EU, because the two regions act almost completely separately. But that's an issue that the EU could easily solve in the future. For now, Bosnia will just have to sit at the back of the line, waiting for their turn. Then there's Turkey, the one at the front of the line, but also the one that keeps getting passed by as if they're a pawn at the start of a chess game. The EU and Turkey have had a customs union since 1995 to boost their trade, and Turkey has been negotiating for EU membership since 2005. But unfortunately there has been little progress because of a couple reasons, most notably the Cyprus problem. Turkey refuses to recognize the EU member Cyprus, instead favoring Northern Cyprus, which only they support. Because of this, the European Council froze 8 sections of the EU acquis in 2006 and Cyprus froze 6 sections in 2009, not allowing Turkey to make any more progress there. In 2019, the European Parliament agreed to stop negotiating with Turkey altogether since they didn't meet the Copenhagen criteria anymore. This has left them with only 1 section of the EU acquis completed, 14 sections frozen, and no more negotiations. Besides that, Turkey has beef with Sweden over not allowing them to join NATO, who can return the favor and block them from the EU. Countries like France and Germany are also hesitant to let them in because they would be the most populous country in the EU, having the same amount of seats as Germany in the parliament. They could also easily sway the Council of the European Union because of its voting system being a qualified majority system, which takes a while to explain, so here's a wall of text explaining it. Greece has been the #1 supporter of Turkish accession into the EU in order to achieve more peace in the Eastern Mediterranean, which was supported by their so-called earthquake diplomacy, greatly aiding each other when earthquakes hit in both nations, which has continued in the recent earthquake that struck southern Turkey and northern Syria just a couple weeks ago. So at this point, the Cyprus problem is just sad. Bosnia D tier, Turkey F tier. With their frozen negotiations, I unfortunately can't give them more. So, looking at this tier list, which candidate or applicant is most likely to become the next EU member? Well, obviously, that's the United fucking Kingdom. So, listen. It's been 3 years since Brexit. Your economic growth is falling, your political relevance is plummeting, the value of the pound is tumbling, public support is waning, and your political leaders are weakening. France and Germany could easily outvote the Lublin Triangle or Turkey with the UK by their side, and it would only have positive economic effects for Britain. You wouldn't even have to give up Scotland or Northern Ireland this time. Like, it just makes so much sense. You fucked around and now you found out. I know that some dodgy people are gonna be like, oh look who's come crawling back, but no. We can be civil and cool and awesome and respectful, just without the opt-outs this time. Like, it just makes sense. Get back in here, you stupid little... Hey, you know, I feel like I'm kinda running out of things I can say here, except for the like, please subscribe kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know, just click the button. You know you want to. Anyways, the next video will be about exclaves and enclaves. Yes, I know that sounds hella boring, but I'll find some way to spice it up, I promise. Anyway, see ya.